The digital divide, algorithmic bias, and digital literacy in the United States. The world is made up of many people who live in different environments and cultures that shape their experiences and struggles. In the United States, we see this as well with people from many different backgrounds, cultures, and races. This diversity is what defines the nation, but it also means that the challenges we face aren't one size fits all. To understand the impact of algorithmic bias and digital literacy in the US, we need to look at how our social economic system shapes access to technology and the ever growing digital divide through issues of income, education, and occupation, as well as geological location. The income issue in the United States is a big topic. However, this isn't a new issue. In fact, the distribution of personal income in the US has become substantially more unequal since the early 1980s, but has followed a general trend of decline that dates back to the 1930s. This is important because income affects education. In the United States, everyone is given an education, but they are not given an equal education. Since public schools rely heavily on property tax, wealthier neighborhoods get better teachers, resources, and technology, while the poorer districts are left behind. Education is important because it is the ladder out of poverty. But in the US, the ladder isn't always equal. To get a good education, you need to be part of a family with a good income. To have a good income, you need to have a good occupation. And to have a good occupation, you need a good education. But right now, a good education isn't enough to get a good occupation. A family with a good occupation makes good money, which means they can afford a good education and good technology and climb their way out of poverty. But it seems to just be a revolving circle. Culturally, the United States is a melting pot with over 340 million people from a wide range of racial and ethnic backgrounds. Politically, it operates as a democracy divided into three branches: legislative, executive, and judicial, that are designed to maintain balance. Every citizen over 18 gets a vote, but disparities in access to education, income, and technology mean that not everyone has an equal voice, understanding, or opportunity. In the United States, there is an issue of the digital divide. But what is that? Anyone know? Well, it is the gap between those who have access to modern technology and those who do not. Breaking it down into numbers, while 95% of United States adults have the internet, access varies greatly by income, education, and geography. 98% of adults earning over $100,000 own a smartphone, but only 79% of those making under 30 do. Broadband access shows an even sharper divide. 95% of high-income households have it, compared to just 57% of low-income ones. Then there's looking at the geological issue. Only about 73% of rural households have high-speed internet compared to 86% in suburban areas. Then there's the issue of digital literacy, which does anyone know the definition of? No? Okay. The ability to find, evaluate, and use digital information effectively. This skill is important because even when students or adults have access to technology, many lack the skills to use it critically and be able to spot misinformation online. But even for people who do have access and digital skills, there's another major issue: algorithmic bias. Algorithmic bias happens when the data used to train artificial intelligence or digital systems reflects existing inequalities. The bias can shape who gets hired, who gets medical treatment, and even who gets targeted by law enforcement. Let's look at a few real-life examples. In the criminal justice system, predicting policy tools are supposed to help prevent crime, but they often rely on historical data that reflects decades of racial bias policing. As a result, Black Americans are more likely to be unfairly targeted or surveillanced. In healthcare, algorithms have an issue prioritizing patients, sometimes favoring white, wealthy patients simply because their medical history is more complete. A lack of data from lower income or minority patients can literally mean the difference between life-saving treatment and being overlooked. In employment, hiring algorithms have been seen to hire more men than women simply because they were trained on past data that reflects a male-dominated industry. The systems don't choose to discriminate, they're just replicating the inequalities we feed into them. The digital divide and algorithmic bias both stem from structural inequalities, especially in income, education, and geological location. People in lower income households are less likely to own a computer or to have home broadband. Not having access to the internet can mostly be seen for two different reasons that tend to intersect. First, being in a location that is hard for a company to get access to, which means they only are willing to give access if they know they're going to make a profit. Bringing us to number 2, lower income areas are more likely to have worse internet because of this same reason. Then there is all the racial disparities. 80% of white adults own a laptop or desktop compared to the 70% of Black adults and 67% of Hispanic adults. A quarter of Hispanic adults rely solely on a smartphone to access the internet, which makes tasks like applying for a job or filling out official forms much harder. Media plays a crucial role in how these issues are understood. Many different types of outlets will bring attention to these issues facing the digital divide through news articles, videos, and broadcast. However, the media can also reinforce bias, often portraying digital inequalities as an individual problem rather than a system one. By focusing on success stories instead of the structural barriers, the narrative can shift blame easily from the institution that created these divides and onto the people who don't succeed. Bridging the digital divide requires 3 things. 1, transparency in algorithms. We need public audits and regulations so that AI systems are held accountable and their decision-making processes are visible. 2, digital literacy education. Schools, libraries, and media organizations must teach people how to recognize algorithmic manipulation, misinformation, and bias online. When people understand how algorithms shape what they see, they can take back control. And 3, equal access. Expanding broadband, distributing affordable devices, and investing in rural low-income areas are essential to bridging the digital divide. Community-based programs can help. Local radio stations and podcasts can push for policy changes, like funding for digital infrastructure and algorithmic transparency. The digital divide, algorithmic bias, and digital literacy are not separate issues. They are interconnected layers of inequality. They shape those who get access to information, opportunity, and power in the United States. By combining fair algorithms, strong digital literacy programs, and equal access to technology, we can create a future where everyone, regardless of race, income, or location, can participate fully in our digital society. Thank you.